welcome to the X-22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 129, and the title of this episode is Military Strikes Behind the Terrorism Threats. And I'll talk about that a little later in this report. But first off, I just want to thank all those that have been donating to the site. I really do appreciate it. The donations go for maintaining the site, support from the hosting company, the malware, virus software, the backup software, and I have a whole list on the X-22 site of where the money goes, and I really do appreciate it. I mean, even anyone that donates $1, $5, $10, $20 and up, I really do appreciate all that you can give, and I really do thank every single one of you. And for those people who are on YouTube, if you want to listen to the report ahead of time, you can come to the X-22 Report site. It is an MP3. You can download it onto your phone, your iPad, onto your computer, or just listen to it straight away on your computer. And you don't have to wait for me to compile everything and upload it to YouTube, because sometimes that is much later in the evening. So I always have the reports, at least I try to, have the reports up and running between 5 and 7 p.m. During the week, and a little bit earlier on Saturday. Okay, let's get right into the economic collapse news, and we're going to go right to Cyprus. Now, they have, as we know, in Cyprus, the capital controls are still in effect. They are easing restrictions on people opening accounts, but anyone in their right mind, I don't know why they would want to open an account, because they still have the capital control restrictions and they can't get their money out. So it makes no sense to actually even open an account. But anyhow, the building permits in Cyprus have decreased by 26.6%. The total value of permits during the first 5 months of 2013 decreased by 9.1%. And from last year, it's a total of 26.6%. And the number of dwelling units recorded a decrease of 14%. And as you know, building permits constitute a leading indicator of future activity in the construction sector, and we can see that investors, people are not going and using their money to purchase and build homes in Cyprus at this time. And it's very difficult to do so when your money is frozen, your money was taken from you, almost 50% of your money was taken, and you still can't get your money out of the banks. So it makes it very difficult for investors to say, hey, you know what, let's start building there and let's start opening accounts. It's very difficult to do this type of, to do this in this type of an economy in Cyprus, especially when they'll steal your money and they'll take a lot of it. Now, the IMF sees no end to French jobless crisis in this decade. Now, I remember President Francois Hollande, just a couple months ago, saying that, he's seeing an incredible amount of healthy growth in this country and everything looks okay. But the IMF is saying, no, this is not true. They need to slow the pace of fiscal tightening next year to avoid an economic relapse, pouring cold water on claims that a fresh cycle of healthy growth is now underway. And we're seeing this all over the European nations, where, there are very mixed reports coming out. There's some reports saying that, oh, everything looks great, and then you dive in a little bit deeper and you cut away all the fat and you get to the real meat of what's going on, and you see that things aren't as rosy as they make it out to seem. And I notice in the mainstream media, when you read all the different reports, it's always the surface of everything. It's never really diving deeper into what's really going on. Almost like in the United States when you have the job numbers, oh, it's 7.4%, but they forget to tell you, like 900,000 of those are temporary jobs and they're not full-time. And, oh, we forgot to tell you about these are all the people who aren't looking for jobs anymore, that we don't count them anymore. Oh, and by the way, we changed the unemployment calculations. So there's a lot of BS that goes on And if you just read the surface headlines, which most people do, you think everything's perfectly fine. But here in Italy, the economy continues to shrink. Newly released figures show that Italy's economy has shrunk in the second quarter, marking this the eighth consecutive quarter of contraction. And the country's gross domestic product shrank by 0.2%, following a 0.6% contraction in the first 3 months of this current year. Now, the unemployment rate in Italy right now is 12.1%, with nearly 40% of Italians between the age of 15 and 24 years being without a job. And we see this happening in many of the countries: in France, in Spain, in Greece, in Cyprus, in the US. We're seeing very high unemployment rates in all of these countries, especially for the youth between 15, 24, up to 30. And these people coming out of college, coming out of school, cannot find work in their field, so they're taking jobs that have nothing to do with their field, or they're taking jobs that are temporary and still living with their parents and not buying homes, not contributing tax revenue for the huge amount of debt that the government has decided to take on from all of their programs. And this just only leads us to one place, and that is called an economic collapse. But let's move on here. Other news: Office Max results highlight office supply sector woes. Office Max reported lower than expected quarterly results on a lackluster sales to corporate customers and regular shoppers, and warned of a weak sales in the period that includes the all-important back-to-school season. So, we're seeing this all over the place. We're seeing retail sales taking a dive, and we see a lot of retail stores are closing. We see a lot of people aren't shopping the way they used to, and just substituting. And I understand that Amazon is doing much better, but moving people from one type of store to another and having them purchase from Amazon instead of other stores. There was a report that let me just look here, that in Casey research, for every 5,000 jobs that Amazon creates, it destroys 25,000 in the process. So yes, Amazon on the surface might look like it's doing well, but just think of how many jobs, how many stores, and how many businesses are being destroyed with this process. It's almost like outsourcing all your work to another country. Yes, Amazon might be picking up some of the retail sales because these stores are closing, but the amount of jobs that it's destroying doesn't make up for the amount that they're creating. But let's move on here. Now, vehicles in the U.S. are getting older. The average age of a car and truck on the U.S. road is about 11.4 years. Now, what's the reason for this? And this goes on to say that cars and trucks on the U.S. roads average 11.4 years in age, the oldest on record since research and consulting firm Polk began to keep track of vehicle age in 1995. Now, people are keeping their vehicles longer so they don't have to make payments. And again, being underemployed, unemployed, making less money, people are not going out and purchasing brand new vehicles so they can have that monthly lease payment. And I can remember back when you had to pay pretty much for a car in cash, and financing was available, but they were cheap enough where you could save up and pay for a car in cash. And then financing came into the mainstream, and everyone started to finance the cars. But what happened was, because of inflation and the expenses, car prices rose very quickly, and financing for many people was not viable. So the industry had to come up with something else called called leasing, where you basically you rented your car for a certain period of time to make the payments lower. But guess what? The prices of vehicles continue to skyrocket. Today, even the lease payments are very high. You have to put a lot of money down to get these type of cars. So what's happening is people rather keep their cars longer instead of having these payments. And especially if you're unemployed or underemployed, you cannot make and you don't have the credit. You can't go out and purchase these cars. And this is why we're seeing a lot more people keeping their cars longer. Now, as far as disposable income goes, Dish is reporting a net loss, and they're saying that they're seeing a decline in paid TV subscribers. And this goes on to say the Dish Network Corp, the second largest U.S. satellite TV company, posted a net loss in the second quarter as it took a $438 million charge related to satellite acquisitions and reported a decline in gross pay TV subscribers. And Dish said total pay TV subscribers declined by 78,000 in the quarter. The company added nearly 624,000 gross pay TV subscribers, down from about 665 a year earlier. So again, this is something that's extra to people, that if you don't need it, you don't use it. And that's normally the first things that go. Again, if you had a full-time job and you went to a part-time job, or you're unemployed, you're going to get rid of the movie channels, you're going to get rid of your dish, you're going to go back to regular TV, you're going to go to maybe basic cable, where that's the cheapest option, and this is what normally happens. Now, there is a big discrepancy between the BLS and the JOLTS survey, and in April, according to JOLTS, which is the Job Openings and Labor Turnover Survey, back in April, there was 108,000 job additions according to the data. And according to the BLS, the job gain was 199,000, or 84% more than the Job Opening and Labor Turnover Survey. In May, JOLTS was 109,000 jobs additions, and according to the BLS, the job gain was 176,000. In June, JOLTS was 120,000, and the other data from BLS was 188,000. And adding across for all of 2013 through the end of June, JOLTS would have us know that only 837,000 jobs were added, or 140,000 per month average. Compare this to the 1.1 million new jobs according to the Establishment Survey, and it's a 42% difference. So what's going on here? Maybe it has to do with the calculation of unemployment, but if you look at this, there is huge discrepancies here. Okay, let's move on here. Detroit is they're saying it's a bail-in template, and it's fleecing pensioners to save the banks. And, we've seen this in Cyprus. We've seen this where they've taken the people's money, almost 50%. And here in Detroit, the Detroit bankruptcy is looking suspiciously like the bail-in template originated by the G20's Financial Stability Board in 2011, which exploded on the scene in Cyprus in 2013 and is now becoming a model globally in Cyprus. The depositors were bailed in, stripped of a major portion of their deposits to recapitalize the banks. In Detroit, it is the municipal workers who are being bailed in, stripped of major portion of their pensions to save the banks. And this also can be a template. And again, bail-ins will be coming to every country, because when all this debt and everything that is going on and the unemployment continually rises, and we have this part one of a collapse. We will see the bail-ins. Banks will freeze people's accounts. They will take your money. And this is already documented in the FDIC Bank of England document. The banks have already changed their TOS, terms of service, and we're seeing this in Canada, the U.S., England, and the European nations, and we will definitely see bail-ins start to happen on the horizon or very, very shortly. Okay, let's move on here. Obama. Now he's going around telling everyone that the housing is in recovery, that it's everything is doing great, and he was in Phoenix, Arizona to discuss, how great the housing is and how it's picking up. Home prices are up 23%, and again, whatever the government officials say, it's always the opposite. The opposite. They were saying this in 2007 too. Real estate, oh, it's so high, it could never come down. That's ridiculous. Why would it fall? We've never seen real estate fall. The Fed, don't worry, there is no real estate bubble. I've never heard of this. This is ridiculous. It's the same thing. And here's some other information. And of course, he's in. I mean, Arizona Phoenix is one of the highest change in price over a year, and it's up 23%. But let's look a little bit deeper into what's going on. Now we have to remember there is always a lag of what's going to happen, and I know many people probably don't believe this, but when I was in New York and the real estate market was turning down and realtors had no clue what was happening, people were no longer going to homes to look at houses, and people started to lower their prices a little bit at a time. At the same time that this was happening, in parallel, in Florida, it was continually booming. Realtors down there had no knowledge that anything was wrong. How do I know this? I lived in New York, and my sister-in-law was a realtor in Florida, and I spoke to her often enough, and she worked in the Miami area. And I said, real estate is very slow up in New York, and people are, there's no traffic to the homes anymore. People aren't coming, and people are starting to lower their prices. No one knows what's going on. She said, oh, we don't see this in Florida at all. It is booming. It is fantastic. It took 6 to 8 months before they saw anything in Florida. And Florida was one of the hardest hits there. And it's always, always a lag between what is going on. Now, what do we see now in the real estate market? We see mortgage applications starting to plunge. We're seeing traffic to new homes slowing. We see construction investment starting to slow. The Fed, wait, they're still purchasing the toxic real estate from banks. Have they slowed on that? No. Banks are still holding huge amount of foreclosures. Now, this report goes on to say, okay, Nevada has seen a 55% decrease compared to 2011 in foreclosures. Utah has seen a 40% decrease, Oregon 40%, Arizona 33%, and California 25%, Michigan 23% decrease. Now, but yet 25 states did experience upticks in foreclosures activities last year. The biggest surges occurred in New Jersey, 55% increase. Florida, 53% increase. Connecticut, 48% increase. Indiana, 46% increase. Illinois, 33%. New York, 31%. And we're seeing a discrepancy here. We're seeing a lag. Now, this also goes on to say that nationally, about 10.9 million homeowners, or 26% of all homeowners with a mortgage, are underwater. carrying banknotes worth more than the current value on their homes. They are still seeing this in the market. The banks are still holding on to their foreclosures. They are not letting them go. Hedge funds are purchasing these homes and using them for rentals and for flipping. People are not purchasing homes. People who are unemployed, underemployed, who don't have, think about, just let's use common sense here. The amount of foreclosures that we've seen, do these people, or let's include short sales, do these people have the credit to go out and purchase these homes? No. So let's think about this one more time about something else. Since the youth employment is between 40 and 50%, are they going out purchasing homes? No. A couple episodes ago, I reported on that more youths are living at home more than ever before into their 30s. If we put all of this together, who is creating this real estate market? Well, the government and the Fed. They are pumping it up. They are going back to the same tactics they used before. They want people to get into the market, so they're trying to give those no down payment loans. People are being, now that we see the mortgage rate, the interest rates are rising, which are pushing more people out of the market. So again, who are purchasing them? Hedge funds, flippers, investors, but not real homeowners. The same thing happened during the 2008 crisis. People were doing no down payment, ARMs, tons of investors, tons of flippers, and eventually what happened? The entire thing fell apart. Houses were vacant. We saw it all in California, Florida, vacant buildings. The same thing in New York, New Jersey, Arizona. We saw it all over. All they're doing right now is pumping it up. And President Obama went out and he went to the best places to push how everything is getting better. But when you take all of this into account, how can it get better? Okay, let's move on here. Now, there was a report that China offers next step in removing dollar from reserve currency status. On August 5th, an official from the People's Bank of China published an article in a leading Chinese market journal suggested that now would be a good time to convene a new Bretton Woods conference with the intention of creating and implementing a new gold-backed reserve currency to replace the dying dollar. And we are seeing this. China is making deals all over the place. They are currently trading, not using the U.S. dollar, and this goes on to say that China made initial move against the dollar when it created a new oil wholesaling structure which would allow countries to buy and sell the commodity in currencies other than petrodollar. Now, we have the U.S. and the Western central bankers waging war to maintain the dollar as the reserve currency. We have China on the other side making deals, backing their currency with gold. And eventually what's going to happen is the Western central bankers are going to go down kicking and screaming and create war, because they will go down fighting, trying to push the dollar as the reserve currency. And that's when we will get into World War III. Now, talking about war, Japan just unveiled the largest warship since World War II. And you have to remember, Japan is a pacifist nation. And what does that mean? It's a strongly and actively opposed to conflict and especially war. But they started building this ship in 2009. And it's the biggest warship since World War II. The ship has a flight deck that is nearly 250 meters, which is 820 feet long, is designed to carry up 14 helicopters, and the Japanese officials say it will be used to use in national defense, particularly in anti-submarine warfare and border area surveillance missions. Now, this is just a build-up to the war that is coming. I mean, they started this in 2009, and it just so happens that it's just now unveiled, and we know that there is a dispute over an island between China and Japan, and it is just perfect timing that now they have a new warship. And at the same time, Japan is trying to change their constitution so they are no longer a pacifist nation, and they have the ability to strike when they need to. Now, there was a report that said, how would a war in a Northeast Asia, what would be a possible scenario? And this goes on to say, should a war break out in East Asia, it is likely to be waged mainly at sea. Whereas in the ocean, where there is no human life for hundreds of miles, these risks are much lower, which may reduce the threshold for taking the decision to go to war. In Northeast Asia, the main conflict potential is centered in the East China Sea, with China and Japan as the main antagonist. And what do we see here now? The Japanese government has announced they're going to increase their military spending in 2013, the first rise in defense budget in 11 years. And why are they doing this? Because all central bankers and governments know where all of this is headed. We are headed to war. Just like we see the U.S. rotating military equipment into the Philippines, and the Philippines just got delivered their first decommissioned U.S. Coast Guard ship, and the U.S. is using the Philippines as a rotational type of base. So when the time comes, the U.S. will have a base right near China to help with the ongoing war. Okay, let's move on here. Let's move on to cyber attacks, and there was a report that the frightening reality about how easily hackers could shut down the U.S. Hacking into and shutting down industrial systems on which the U.S. relies is pretty easy, this report says, according to recent presentations in the Black Hat Hacker Conference. And what this goes on to say is that a hacker could break in to a high voltage transformer, spin it out of control, and have it explode, bringing down the power grid infrastructure, like, say, in the tri-state area in New York, and putting everyone into darkness. And they also can, the other vulnerabilities are the sensors used to monitor oil, water, nuclear, and natural gas infrastructure can be hacked into with a relatively cheap 40-mile range radio transmitter. Those sensors could be spoofed to show false readings, and the whole thing can just fall apart and bring everything down. And again, this report goes on to say that that they don't even want to think about what the worst case scenario would be, because it could get really ugly if things go really bad. And Russia and China do have the capability of these type of attacks. And like I said in my other reports, the main doomsday cyber attack will be used as the last-ditch effort. And they've been reporting on this for over a year and a half now, about how the infrastructure, the financial institutions, we've seen banks being hit by cyber attacks. We've seen infrastructure areas being hacked into. CNN even showed a video of a generator being hacked into, and you see it start to smoke and then explode. So we're seeing these things all over the place, and this will eventually, if everything else fails, they will use this main cyber attack to bring down the power to bring the American people to its knees. So they beg for war, and they will blame it. They'll blame all this on another country, so they're not blamed for the economic collapse. And again, this is their last-ditch effort. Okay, let's move on to what's happening now with this Al-Qaeda terror threat. And the more I look into this, there are a couple things that are going on with this. Number one, the purpose of course, is to scare Americans that Al Qaeda is back stronger than ever, and the NSA and the agencies have the capability of intercepting chatter, and this is why the spying is necessary, and we need to do more spying on all the people around the world and in America. But let me ask a question here. Would a terrorist group just pick up a phone or a radio and just talk about their terrorist attack? I mean, really think about this for a second. Anyone in their right mind would never use this type of communication to talk about what they're going to use next. Any military, any type of operation would never use this type of technology. They would create an encryption code that nobody else has, and when you don't have the key or the method, it is very hard to break into. And the NSA would not be able to break into. That's why they're asking for all your passwords and stuff from all the corporations, because they're all encrypted, and they can't break into them. But on the other hand, they would not use public communication systems to talk about what they're going to do. And then again, Al Qaeda is a CIA paid mercenaries, so to the everyday American, this makes sense. Now, why are they closing and keeping closed, and now evacuating the U.S. citizens from Yemen area and other areas around, Syria, Iran, and Yemen? This is where they're saying, because it looks like what they're doing is a military clean sweep strike. Now, there's a lot of uprisings going on in the Middle East, and it's very unstable. It's going on in Yemen. It's going on in Egypt, parts of Saudi Arabia and the Bahrain area. It's going on there. And this looks like it's a different stage approach to what they're trying to accomplish here. One, show why NSA is relevant. Two, scare all the American people. Three, have a military strike to get terrorists. And by doing this, they don't need Congress to declare war, and they can send troops in and handle all of these uprisings and maintain control in these areas without saying we're going to war. And this is really what it's starting to look like. And especially in Yemen, I put up today a map, and the Gulf of Aden, Yemen is a key choke point right there. And, there we can see that all of this is happening for these three reasons. And, if people have other reasons why they think this is happening, but when I look at this, these are the reasons that I'm seeing right now, and these military strikes are being shrouded in this terrorist threat. So this is not considered war, and they have the ability to go in with military personnel to do a clean sweep of all of these people that are giving them a problem, and having the central bankers and the government maintaining control in this area. And this is what I see. And to the regular people who are sleeping out there, all they're seeing is terrorist threat, NSA, and behind this, the real objective is to do a key military strike without Congress's approval for war, because this isn't war. This is war on terrorism, which is completely different in the Obama administration eyes of how they conduct war and drone strikes and whatnot. Listen, everyone, I want to really thank everyone for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.